And actually, I'm going to go ahead and just introduce the symposium in this room, which is a neuromodulation update. We have two chairs, Dr. Mike Wolfson and Dr. Kip Ludwig, I just asked them if they'd cover this topic, and they were all over it, so I'm really excited.
Thank you. All right. There we go. All right, there you go. All right, so we're very, very excited to put on this session. It's actually been a fantastic time for neuromodulation. There's been a lot of recent FDA approvals, a lot of recent investment that we're going to talk about in this session. But I wanted to start off with a little bit of a refresher. So I'm an engineer, and neuromodulation is really the combination of two recent developments. This is the human connectome, and if you're an engineer, this looks like a bunch of wires. In fact, there's 100 billion wires in the brain, and we're learning how to interface with them better. But the interesting thing is they not only have direct control or indirect control of almost all of the functions in the body. So the therapies that are being developed are much more diverse than I think many people normally associate with neuromodulation, which is often associated primarily with DBS for Parkinson's disease and spinal cord stimulation for pain. The other thing that's really important is the development of technology over time. What I have over here in the left-hand corner for me is the Hyman pacemaker. This was actually made in about 1930s and had a hand crank, actually, to create the electricity necessary to defibrillate the heart. 10, 20 years later came up the Zoll pacemaker. This was the state-of-the-art as of roughly a year ago, which is the Boston Scientific or Medtronic pacemaker, which is actually a very small battery and is implanted into the heart through a simple venous incision. But the game has actually changed in the last year. This is the Medtronic micro pacemaker. This is now FDA approved. This is about the size of your thumbnail. And this is really the ultimate in both personalized and precision medicine. This can pace the heart. It is completely wireless, it'll last for 10 years, but it's also smart. It can actually measure the QRS complex and change the rate of pacing based off of changes in the QRS complex. So now you're talking about the game has changed. We no longer have these huge honking devices that are, quite frankly, dangerous implants. You're getting to the point where you have a minimally invasive implant. In fact, there's two recent FDA approvals for what are injectable devices that are wireless. So this changes the game. We can interface with the nervous system, but we can do it in an incredibly precise way. And then we can have sensors to actually measure the patient's status, the biomolecular levels, and then titrate therapy continuously over the day. So there's been a lot of excitement about this idea of called bioelectronic medicines or electroceuticals. Electroceuticals actually was coined in 2000, well, technically was not coined in 2013, but got a lot of PR from GlaxoSmithKline when they came out with a Nature paper where they talked about the possibility of using these injectable wireless closed-loop devices to actually titrate biomolecular delivery to end organs. The idea that if you hijack the nervous system, you can take control of neurochemicals in the body and change end organ function. What is endlessly amusing to me is a year or two later, they had to rebrand it as bioelectronic medicines. Electroceuticals was actually patented by Aviva Technologies in 2007, and so they published this paper, and then they found out they had to change the name of their rebranding effort for neuromodulation, and they changed it to bioelectronic medicines. But it's caught a lot of popular attention. In fact, this was the cover of the Sunday New York Times, Can the Nervous System Be Hacked? The truth of the matter is, however you want to call it, electroceuticals or bioelectronic medicines, as Marty can tell you, this is something that's been around for many, many years that started with the cardiac pacemaker. And in fact, I come from Minnesota, so I'm a little bit Minnesota-centric at the Mayo, but it's projected to be a $20 billion a year worldwide industry by 2020. Estimates vary. It is the fastest single growing medical device market. It has a 5 to 7% compound annual growth rate, and it leverages Moore's law. These are getting smarter, smaller, more easily implanted. There are over 100 companies for neuromod in Minnesota alone right now, and there's over 1,000 clinical trials in progress. So I love this next slide. So this is actually the clinical trials that are in progress just for stimulating the cervical vagus. I only made one of these up. Let's see if you can find it. All but 2 of these are at least CE marked in Europe already, and they're all stimulating the same superhighway. The truth of the matter is, for neuromodulation in general, we have these fantastic phenomenological effects in about 15% of the patients, but it is roughly a good educated guess about how these are working. But the thing is, it is working in patients. Where I originally came from the NIH, and a lot of our drugs are failing when we make the jump from animal models to humans, we have human effect, and we don't know how it works. And to me, this motivates an investment in figuring out how to make these work better. So there's also been a lot of recent large investments in better understanding how these work, and some of our speakers are going to talk about these. There's the new SPARK program at the NIH, which is a greater than $200 million investment in understanding the functional neuroanatomy of end organs to really catalyze these minimally invasive devices. There's the Electrics program and other programs at DARPA that Doug Weber is graciously going to speak about that also will catalyze development in this space with some really fantastic technology that takes us well beyond what the pacemaker can do. There is a $715 million joint investment from GlaxoSmithKline and Verily, which is formerly Google Life Sciences, to create what's called Galvani Bioelectronics, which is to catalyze growth in this space. And they also have Action Potential Ventures, which is a venture capital firm to catalyze in this space. And then, of course, the BRAIN Initiative. Unfortunately, we may have to change the acronym to something to do with Trump, but the BRAIN Initiative is really doing some fantastic work to catalyze neuromodulation through really innovative public-private partnership structures, and Mike Wolfson will be talking a little bit more about that. So we had a little bit of change in the agenda. Unfortunately, Roy Katzo from Galvani, his mother passed away on Wednesday and will not be speaking this week. So Mike Wolfson has graciously agreed to talk about the SPARK programs and the NIH BRAIN Initiative programs in his stead. But I've had the opportunity to work with each of these individuals to some extent. Carlos Pena, in terms of catalyzing neuromodulation growth, the FDA has done some fantastic outreach to all of these programs that you're going to talk about to make it more transparent, to make us better understand the regulatory path. And I'd really like to commend him and the group at the FDA for me coming from industry originally. The FDA kind of scared me back in the day, 7-10 years ago. And so it's been remarkable to see the level of transparency and how much what they're doing is really going to grow the economy. Jay Mako is actually substituting for Tom Oxley, but this is a new device that he's going to talk about that can really change the risk profile for more invasive brain implants. Mike Wolfson I already discussed, and Doug Weber. This was actually, in the last 24 hours, a little bit of a difficult session for me to talk about because I heard in the last 24 hours that the president's budget wants to reduce the NIH funding 20%. And so I know that government employees can't stump for themselves. They can't lobby for themselves, but I'm not a government employee, and I can state my opinion here. I've worked with these people, and when you see these programs, I think it's going to catalyze economic growth. I think it is a trivial investment for the return that's going to be created, and I think it's important that groups like Ascent, if they agree, proactively lobby for places like the NIH that gave $15,000 to help support this meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Carlos Pena, and thank you very much.